So the 11 by 11 tipping point means it's going to take you 11 weeks to get to the point where you've saved 11 minutes and you feel that it's of value.
We did see that it made a lot of difference when users knew what to expect when things were happening, who to call when there was a problem, all that type of stuff.
But don't answer that now. Leave the magic for later.
Don't wait to get started until such stage as you've cleaned everything up. Otherwise, you'll never clean it up.
Hi, and welcome to another episode of the Cloud Architects podcast. Today with added spunk and vigor, but before we start talking about our guest, Chris, it's great to see you again all the way across the ocean in Australia.
Nick, always good to see you, mate. Really, really glad we could put this together. Great episode today as well, because we're only having to juggle 2 time zones. I love it when we're able to have guests from my time zone, because it means that I don't have to wake up at 1 a.m. or some weird hour like that so that we can actually talk. So this is really, really great for me. Super excited today. We have Kirsty McGrath to talk to us, and we've got a topic I think that is going to be interesting for a lot of folks, right? Because, I think there's a lot of organizations that either don't think about this at all or think about this a little. So we thought, let's get someone who really knows a lot of and lives and breathes this stuff. So Kirsty, would you want to just give yourself a quick introduction so that our listeners and viewers know, who you are and what you're about?
Sure. Oh, geez, lob it over the fence.
It doesn't have to be quick either.
Okay, right. So my name's Kirsty. I have a consulting organization called On Point Solutions, and I'm a Microsoft MVP. So I'm a 7 times awarded Microsoft MVP, and we're up for, that 8th award. We have to win that every year. And we win that for technical excellence in the community. And, in that particular space, my main core focus is adoption. And of course, my area of expertise is the Microsoft 365 space, and underneath that, of course, AI and a lot of that functionality, whether it be Windows. And so I kind of live in that space, devices and Service Hub. And adoption being that end-to-end journey that a business or that takes the end user on, for example. You've got the analysis side of it, the setting up and workshops, through the change management, the comms and the training. So I've been running the adoption user groups in Australia for 9 years now, bringing together, both Sydney, Melbourne and Brisbane, and speaking at a lot of conferences, both Microsoft as well as the various and variety of community conferences that are actually out there. I have a YouTube channel. It's the M365 Adoption, Microsoft 365 Adoption channel that you can actually go to. And also don't forget to subscribe to that and the Cloud Architects, because, really important that we kind of keep ourselves up to date in this knowledge. When I'm not doing that, when I'm working with clients, I work alongside Microsoft. I've worked with their top 200 clients on the Working Smarter programs. I do a lot of their webinars. I'm currently running a webinar series for the Microsoft Reactor in terms of Copilot productivity. So we've run 2 already, and the next one is coming up, very soon. And so I tend to get very heavily involved in Microsoft and promptathons, adoption, and taking end users on that kind of journey. And if I'm not doing that, I'm doing cake decorating as a bit of fun. I'm a bit of a hardcore cake decorator. So that's kind of me in a nutshell, and family and all that fun stuff. I'm a mama. They're all grown up now.
It's such an interesting sort of segue, the whole cake adoption thing, and I only learned this about you at Summit recently, right? Because
yes.
we were just chatting as you do at Summit, and I guess a mutual friend of ours and former MVP and old friend of the show, who I think Greg was on at least once or twice, Greg Sheridan, also does sort of the baking and the stuff, and I thought that was just amazing.
Into it, yeah. So it's fun. I got to meet him up at the International Cake Show. I know him. I've known him for many years, but all of a sudden he was there. Hello.
Yeah. And so for those of you who don't know, we're talking about greginsydney.com, who used to be a team / Skype for Business MVP, and he recently retired, maybe a couple years ago now, and he's living the high life, just doing baking and all sorts of fun stuff. So
we talk all the time. So yeah, and I used to present at the Unified Communications user group for him, and that's where I got to know a lot of the community. And with being an MVP, that's tend to be what we do. So you might see I've got a fairly busy presence online, as we do.
Yeah. So, and I think that's a good point, because we talk about sort of the UC side, or the historic side of user adoption. Right? I sort of first came to know of user adoption as a thing, and sort of through my work doing migrations for customers, right? Very often, we found that the most successful migrations are the ones where the business really engaged with the user base through adoption programs and training and all of the stuff, right? Because I guess it's easy to say, well, we're going from back in the day, an Exchange version to another Exchange version. So why do we care? Or we're going from an on-premises version of Exchange to a cloud version. It's the same product. Why do we need to talk to the users, right? But we did see that it made a lot of difference when users knew what to expect when things were happening, who to call when there was a problem, all that type of stuff. But I feel like things have changed just a little bit now. Like, we're in this new world now of the solutions that we have, everything's evergreen all the time. Is adoption still as big a deal, or is it more of a bigger deal now than it was?
It's actually bigger. When you think about it, back when I used to do all these programs, I come from a history of, I was originally an executive assistant long ago and helping, the individuals in the team come on the journey. I was the change champion, as I used to work at Microsoft, and I worked in Australia's largest telco and a few others. So I would be that change champion that would actually help those around me on the journey. And the thing was, an upgrade, because it was very static, it was maybe once every 3 years. You think about it, went from Office 2013, and then all of a sudden we had 17. How many years have we got there? So when we did it, we would focus and we do a lot more training. It wasn't as much change management. It was more training, and it was longer sessions of training and very hands-on sessions. Then we started to see a bit of a shift where it was just do a seminar, because it was just upgrade training. So then training kind of really fell over, and it was more about the change management journey and bringing people on, and just a little bit of upgrade training. Then things got really hard and fast. The pace of change became full on, that a lot of organizations went, oh, it's just too much, we're not doing it, because we constantly have to do it. It's like, well, yeah, you really do have to constantly be doing it, and thinking about it. So we saw it really kind of get bigger as their environment got more of a mess, because they weren't doing the training and things started really falling over, and the back end architecture and SharePoint was blowing out, and we had files everywhere, and people didn't understand the cloud, and people were still attaching and not sending links out. They're still doing that, by the way. But we started to see the mess coming in and the confusion, because the wheel that's behind me. So this is my infographic. It's what I'm quite well known for and quite famous for. It's on its 45th edition over the 9 years that I've been doing it. Now, you think about that as change. These are the applications. So these are the things that PowerPoint, Excel, Word, stock standard. But the other stuff that you've got in here, now that's shifting and changing. And for it to go through and have that many changes and iterations over the years gives you an idea of how fast the pace is. And most people don't even realize what is in the wheel. So it makes for some real interesting challenges when it comes to adoption. And something like Copilot or AI gives us a perfect opportunity to go, hang on a second, let's start lifting some skill sets. So the conversations are just shifting a little based on, is it changing? Yeah, it is. And it's even more important than we've ever seen before.
Mm-hmm. I'd like to ask you, Kirsty, how do you deal with confusion in AI? I'd like to preface that just a little bit. When we told people to do something like scheduling in M365, which one of the 6 kind of scheduling apps would you use, right? And am I doing a little bit of planner? Am I doing some to-do? Do I do a project online, project full fat? Do I use Outlook? And now that we get into the Copilot world, are you telling users to use Copilot for M365 versus Copilot for Excel, Copilot for ... How do you deal with that confusion?
Okay. It's a very different type of a conversation, because the fundamental architecture is still there. So, for example, I would say you've got a Copilot now in Loop. You can use it. And a lot of people are going, what's Loop? Or you can use it alongside Planner. What's Planner? Okay, you've got to do, and everything flows into it, whether it be Outlook, Planner, whatever anything in the architecture as a task all flows into do. What's to do? So you can say kind of that, but they've got to still go to the of where it's actually kind of living to work with, and they're going to understand the technology. So we can just say you can schedule something with Copilot, but they've got to know what to ask for. So the challenge then is, do they know the technology? If they don't know what to ask for, telling them to go get Copilot to help you, then it all falls over.
So, I mean, it sounds like really there still is really that sort of making sure that is it using the right tool for the right job, or is it just using the tool that you're most comfortable with and then becoming more efficient at it, right? Because I think there can be a divergence there. Well, yes.
Yeah, that productivity piece is really important. So what we're seeing is whenever something new comes out, like when Microsoft Teams came out, the challenge with the likes of Teams, it was a pane of glass over the whole of 365. People didn't understand the me space, OneDrive, the we space, SharePoint, the fact that Teams is a pane of glass and the back-end infrastructure of a chat is OneDrive and the back-end infrastructure of a channel is SharePoint, and the me, we, and dealing with the us and the them, and what does that look like as an architecture? So what happens is we then go, okay, now you've got Copilot over the top of all of this, and people don't know where to ask. Do I ask it in chat? Do I ask it chat web or chat work? Can I do it in Teams? Can I do it in Outlook? And are they different things if I do it in the browser, or do I do it? Okay, so we've got a lot of untangling to do, because they go, what's the difference even between, they don't even know to be able to say, and I'm working with businesses, that whole Copilot chat to Microsoft 365 Copilot. And what is the difference between the two, and using the right words, because they're kind of going, we don't even know how to educate them. What words do we use for the free version? Well, it's not free. You're paying for a license. So the free version is if you're maybe going to Edge and you're actually dealing with it through a browser and you've got it, the free kind of side of things. So we got to be careful around some of the words that we're using. So more than ever, there's a lot of confusion when it comes to the endpoints, because there's a lot of endpoints to Copilot. There's so many places that you can actually go and you get a different result. So, for example, you were talking about that, scheduling or the task management side of things. Even if I want to be really creative in my prompt, for example, I'm not going to go to Word and use Word to be doing things that are really, really creative. I probably would be in Loop, or maybe through the browser, or whiteboarding, or if I'm doing brainstorming or creative type stuff, I'm not going to do that in Word. So they often don't know some of that taxonomy, or where would you go. And helping them on that journey comes down to training more than ever before.
And I feel like it's a moving target though, right? Because even just for myself, I get so frustrated because I feel like almost every time I use Teams, they've moved something around. Like I just leave the chat where the chat is supposed to be, and leave, because every single time, and then of course every time you launch it, it's got a wizard to tell you all the new stuff. And I'm like, I don't care about this. I have a meeting to join. I don't want to see this thing.
That's right.
So I can only imagine the challenge here if you're, I don't know, preparing documentation or preparing some sort of user guides or things that users are consuming. I mean, it must be changing every week. Like, how do you stay on top of that?
There is some real challenges in regards to that. A lot of times when I see businesses creating content, I say don't, because it's just moving too fast. It is only as good as the month that you're rolling it out. So, for example, at one point through the pandemic, there was 726 updates to Microsoft Teams in the year. So how do you keep your content relevant, and what does the cadence look like to keep it updated? So, a lot of learning platforms or organizations that are building learning content for you, I go, well, what's your cadence? And they go, we do it once a quarter. And I'm going, how can you do that? It's so outdated in the space of 2 months or 3 months that it would become really frustrating for the end user, because it will look quite different in their environment compared to what you're seeing. And even Microsoft can't keep up to date with their content on the likes of Learn and Information. They're not a particularly big team. And so it's understandable it's a struggle when it comes to it. Hence why just-in-time learning now becomes so much more important, and helping people to understand the evergreen nature and embracing that evergreen nature to try and be curious. And that's that curiosity that, as we start to get into it, they have it on their mobile phone, things updating all the time. So if you start to go, that's what it's like in a business environment, they kind of get a little less frustrated with the environment as it moves around. there's still some level of frustration, but the more you're helping them on that change journey when it comes to the cloud, the better the response we get. And one of the things that I really note was when you get a good change, a really good change program, change, adoption, training, adoption being the higher level over the arching in terms of the change strategy sitting kind of underneath adoption. When you look at the bigger adoption strategy, the better change management that you've actually got, the less pressure on your help desk, the less downtime you actually have. The faster you move, the better client results you get, even employee satisfaction, work-life balance, all these things come into play if you've actually got a really good program of work. When you get in and you do it, and I did one not long ago, it's award-winning one, where even though there was a ton of things going wrong in the project, it was blowing up all over the place, with good change management, good guides, good training, good structure, it just looked as smooth. It just looked like those errors were part of the, click here, because we're totally avoiding all of the problems, or you're walking through the problems and don't worry about it. You don't even know that it's a problem when you're doing the click through, and you don't have to do it again because you're done. And that looks like it's a really seamless. We don't have any calls really coming into the help desk around stuff that shouldn't be hitting the help desk. So let them focus on the more technical and not the productivity, efficiency side of people struggling to use these tools. So there's, can take a massive amount of pressure off the business when we do things right.
Let me drill into that just for a second, because I don't believe you. And I'll tell you why.
Yeah.
Because I deal very much like Chris with my own frustration of, there are some things in my life I'm willing to put considerable effort in because I care. Yeah. And those things, if there's some change that comes towards me, sure, I'll absorb that, I'll roll with it. I might even be delighted about the change. When it comes to the tools that are used every day that I want to use in a certain manner to do my job, how do you get past that? Thanks, Kirsty. Lovely feature. I don't care. I just need my formulas in Excel to work so I can get on with my day job. I don't care about this new thing that's arrived. I preferred the old interface. And did I mention I don't care? I just want to do my job.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the message we get all the time in change management, because change management is just about conflict negotiation and resolution. Ultimately, that's what it's all about. That's what we do, is that kind of hand-holding to bring them on the journey. More often than not, when I've got someone that's in that particular space, there's a lot that comes with it. Yes, you need to get your job done. And we also call it it's like that, the teddy bear, the comfort zone. So we've got a hold of, this is our comfort, and I've got my teddy bear on my blanket, and this is how I do it, and this is the way that I actually want it. Like with anything, and I'm not saying that, people are children in any way, shape, or form. What I'm actually saying is, for you to move from that comfort space to another comfort space, I've got to be able to give you a good reason to swap the teddy bear for the blankie, or top the blankie to some, which was what
That's
we do
fair.
with the young ones. Yeah. We want to get rid of a dummy. Well, what's the benefit for them to get rid of the dummy? So ultimately we need to take them on that journey to go, do you know what? I absolutely get you need to get your job done. And I had it, I even just recently, something as simple as, doing Excel and pivot tables. They didn't want to come and do a 1-hour session. And they got in there and they go, I don't know what pivot tables are. And I had this poor lady, she was in tears at the end. I'm going, why are you crying? And she goes, I can't believe it was that simple. I spend 3 days every single month producing reports, and I didn't know about pivot tables, and they are the bane of my existence. I absolutely hate them. I know I've got to get them done. I just got to get my job done. But I didn't realize that I could literally go a pivot table or a Copilot, ask it to create a pivot table, and it would do it for me, or just a drag and drop. I can't believe it's actually that easy. And a week later came tearing up to me and then just said, and gave me this big hug. It's like, oh, hello. And I got this this fabulous hug. And she said, I managed to get that job done in 2 hours compared to 3 days. Now, that's productivity and efficiency.
Yeah.
If you can show and you can bring them on the journey and go, how do I solve the pain? Because pain is time and time is money. So if you can bring people on that journey and find the pain point, you've got a scenario, and that's the scenario that helps a business to convince the user on that journey. So those kind of scenarios, and where we got change champions and senior leadership driving the way forward, showing better ways of doing things, and as a team, then it brings the people on that journey along with it, and we tend to then have less pain happening where you go, I just need to get my job done. And I've certainly had plenty of people, there's no way they're going to move off that. I'm retiring in a month, I don't want to know. Excellent. That's all very well and good. Shake the hand. Enjoy your last month. Yeah. You're not going to convince anyone
right.
to change something. Yeah.
It sort of strikes me, I guess, that, it makes a lot of sense, especially for larger organizations where they may have, a lot of different types of information workers. It may actually make a lot of sense for folks like that to just have a permanent sort of change management office, if you will, right? A team of folks who just do this constantly and just, in a constantly evolving sort of way. Is that something that actually does happen in the real world, or am I just making things up here?
No, it really is. I mean, the downside is with things changing so much, we see some real change fatigue. And there's a lot actually happening. And whether it's a big organization or small, like the SMB space at the moment is going through a huge change, because all of a sudden they're seeing AI and they're finally taking all of their data from on-premise to the cloud, because they go, we want to be able to do that and stay competitive. So now I've got all these huge programs going on of all these SMBs finally moving over, and we're going back to the fundamental basics of, what is SharePoint, OneDrive, and sending a link? Where are your files sitting? I've now finally got this or this, or, So we're really kind of restarting some of those conversations on the journey, which is really interesting. And the same thing happened with Microsoft Teams when it was rolling out. We saw all of a sudden a real kind of surge, but then, of course, COVID hit, everything blew up, and everyone had to go to Teams overnight. There was no adoption. There was no change management. And now, a couple of years down the track, it's such a mess that a ton of organizations are reaching out and going, it's a mess. We need to educate. People aren't working in channels. They're caught in the pain in the old, and they're not quite in the new. So they're right in the pain point, and things are overwhelming, and they're frustrated, and we can't get our work done, and it's all a mess. And we now want to put AI on, but they don't know how to do anything else yet because it's all a mess, and we need to start fixing it. So change teams, when they're embedded inside a business, make a huge difference if they're taken also seriously by the likes of senior leadership. So, change is only as good as the community that they've often got around them. But as good change managers, we often know how to get around sometimes those senior leaders to engage in the business, to do things. But I've seen it even in smaller organizations, 200 people, 400 people might even have a change manager. Either that or they work with the likes of partners or myself, and we come in and we just work alongside them to get these programs done for good change management. You can also have senior leaders that are change enablers, and they can do change training. And then they're all across the business. Everyone really should be a change enabler to be able to have the right messages and understand it. And training with Copilot.
I'd imagine as well, like, it's not like we're just, rolling out a new version of Office here and we need folks to learn how to use some of the new functionality, right? There's a lot of the stuff like Copilot oftentimes comes with a large bill attached to it, right? There's a cost to these things. And so I guess being able to really drill into adoption versus just, turning on the feature, right? As the consumption piece of it, right?
And
is quite important.
For a long time, adoption was classed by Microsoft as you've got the license and you've assigned to the license. That was adoption. And it's like, that is not adoption. That whole consumption of it, it's not. It's integrated into your everyday world, and it's sustainable adoption, because you can get people on and then all of a sudden things start dropping off. So to get to sustainable adoption takes a little bit more in terms of energy from an individual. And a learning business, when we have an organization, whatever size it happens to be, that understand what a learning business looks like, we start to see a fundamental change. The one thing I will say in regards to Copilot is it's a button that people don't have to push. You can buy a license.
Are you seeing businesses quantify or justify the spend on Copilot? Are we seeing, because I think that if you look at something like Copilot or GitHub Copilot, right? Pretty easy to kind of quantify that, because you go, well, I'm a developer. This thing has just saved me 30 minutes on a task. And even for me personally, I use GitHub Copilot a lot, and it consistently saves me an hour, 2 hours here, 2 hours there on things that I'm doing. But as an information worker, with all of the different Copilot stuff that you have within M365, probably a little bit more difficult to kind of be able to measure that, right? Are you seeing businesses do that? Yeah.
Yeah, there are certain components, because Copilot, you do have a lot of analytics that come in the back end to be able to help and support you. You've got the whole adoption analytics as well across the 365 suite. So you can kind of see what's going on, whether it's being used, the type of prompts, how much time that prompt would have saved. So Microsoft do provide a lot of analytics. And there are other third-party solutions that you can kind of go to that will also help you to support you on some of those analytics as well. So what we'll often have is there's the quantifiable and the quantitative, qualitative side of the analytics. So depending on which way you go, of asking questions, and you've got open-ended type questions to closed type questions to kind of go get the sentiment. Now, you can ask Copilot around sentiment in meetings, for example. Does it seem like everyone understands, or is everyone kind of embracing this? You can kind of, based on the type of words that people use, it will look at sentiment. So you can ask those sorts of questions of it. But there is analytics. And, the one thing that I will actually say when it comes to the license, and the fact that people don't have to push the button, and they go to m365.cloud.microsoft, you've got search, and it's got the Microsoft 365 Copilot there. So they think they're using Copilot, and it's just the search, and it's not. It's the Copilot button that they need to go to on the navigation as part of your, apps launcher and things like that. So you've got the navigation, and they got to physically go to Copilot. Then they don't know if they're asking work or web, and then the results, and then the frustration around what they're going to get, because they don't quite know. They go out, they see a ton of information around things that they could do with it. And it goes, well, it's not doing that. And I say, well, do you have a license? I don't know. How do I tell I've got a license? They don't know. They don't understand. So they're looking at the screen and going, well, do you have a toggle that says work or web? Where? And I go up the top, just above where you've got the work or web. I'm not seeing anything. Well, then you've just got the 365 Copilot. You've just got Copilot Chat, which is web-based, grounded. So it's not embedded in your work environment. Oh, okay. So that's why I can't see it in Word like my coworker. Like, that's right, you can't, because people aren't getting educated on what Copilot Chat is as a functionality. So when it comes to ROI, and it was rolling out in the business, they were purchasing 1 year, and it was living in IT. Now, I recently did a blog. It was on LinkedIn, where I talked about the top 10 things that I'm seeing as a challenge. And so anyone can see it on my LinkedIn. And in those challenges were things like, we're giving it to IT. And IT have got the licenses, and they want to jump to technical solutions. So they're all about the Copilot Studio and the heavy technical, but they're not about the everyday usage and the scenarios that are good for the business. So then they give it to a senior leader, or the senior leader wanted it. And then they don't teach or train the senior leader. The senior leader is just expected to work it out themselves. A button they don't have to push. They don't have the time. Then everyone goes, oh, this wasn't worth it. And then licenses start falling over. We have to have the business scenarios around what's a really good prompt that's everyday productivity to save your time for the individual, and help them to learn what those prompts are, because it's not IT. They live in different applications to PowerPoint, Word, Excel. Yeah, they don't live generally in a lot of those applications. So we need the people that are the champions that are going to live in that space. And you need more people than you think in terms of piloting, and longer than you think on your pilot, because the research has shown it's an 11 by 11 tipping point. So I'm not sure if you've seen, the blog around that Microsoft have actually got up around in the work lab around the 11 by 11 tipping point. So the 11 by 11 tipping point means it's going to take you 11 weeks to get to the point where you've saved 11 minutes and you feel that it's of value. And that's in work-life balance and less meeting and being okay. So it's going to take longer. So the average pilot, you might be doing it for 2 weeks or a month, was the average kind of pilot. That's out the window. It's going to take longer to embed behaviors, because we're dealing with something quite different, fundamentally different in terms of our thinking. Another, piece that's come out is that whole search engine mindset, where we're really caught in that I put in a couple of words in searching. People don't even understand Boolean operators, they and or not. Haven't even been doing that. So they're going just a general search. Now, Copilot will give you back a very generic response, and it won't be anywhere near what you want. And then they don't understand that it's an iterative chat, and then they can go back and forwards kind of 30 times in Copilot to get that AI response. So they're sometimes not even delving down, or they don't know what they're doing when they're going into it, or how far they can push it. And until such stage in the business, till they get to the point where they're pushing the boundaries of Copilot, they don't know then when to buy potential solutions or plug it in using Copilot Studio and all of the other stuff to take it to the next level. So if they don't know how far to push it and the business isn't pushing it, they don't know then the next step. So we then start seeing licenses sort of falling off. They don't kind of get what it looks like and where to go and can go into the taxonomy. But if we're talking like the tipping point, for example, the search engine mindset, they don't understand how to have a conversation with AI, and it's quite different, a conversation with AI. And their skill sets that we're having to teach people.
I think that's such a good point because, sorry, Nick, I wrestled with this myself, right? 20 years of Google have just conditioned my brain into thinking that when I want to ask for something, it's got to be very short, succinct, and very much to the point. And over time, I've now found myself having more detailed conversations with Copilot about stuff, right? And being able to say, nope, that's not right. I'm getting this error message. Can we try again and refine that a little bit, right? And Copilot's been particularly good at that because you can use that sort of context to be able to pull back. And I think it's really important to be able to have folks understand that because I think generally this still people don't realize the difference between a prompt and possibly just a search term that you would typically use in your old school search engine, right?
Yeah.
And Nick,
so
you were about to say something profound.
Oh yeah. No, well, I was going to say, in my limited understanding, Kirsty, what I've been seeing, and if we look at where we all start, whatever we do at home, and at home, we've got a bunch of engines to choose from. So if that's Gemini, Perplexity, if I'm doing Meta,
you name it.
Grok,
Yep.
some of the stranger things that Grok is doing, and then ChatGPT. ChatGPTs are finding doing an interesting conditioning on the market because we seem to have this journey where we go and we start using AI as a replacement for search. So help me find, right?
Yes.
And then we mature into expert on demand. Help me solve this problem. And then we discover there's this thing about memory. And then we say, these are the things I like. These are the tasks I'm trying to solve in the long term. And I want you to become a companion while I do this particular stream of whatever I'm doing, which could be research, it could be something I do at work, it could be a cooking journey that I'm on. I've had discussions around, I want you to help me brush up my German for a trip that I'm going to go on. So just have a daily conversation with me and correct my pronunciation. Tell me where I'm going wrong. And by the way, this particular chat, I'll revisit on Friday and we'll pick it up. And so there's that concept of memory and context.
Yes.
What are you seeing in terms of the struggles that you have within enterprise? Are we stuck in search? Are we stuck in expert on demand? Or are we finding that there's a nibble in enterprise towards, here's this companion with context that's helping me do the thing I need to do?
The way that I'll explain it inside a business is it's like having a graduate. When you have a graduate and they're sitting in front of you, you're not going to just say, create an agenda for me and walk away. Which is our search engine mindset. Yeah. That's a search engine. It's like ordering a coffee. You don't walk up and say, I want a coffee or I want a latte and walk away. They go, do you want milk? Do you want a small, medium, large cup? Do you want a, so, it's like, where does the prompt come in that's a bigger prompt? You can start from something simple, but if it's something you're going to use all day, every day, you want a bigger prompt that you can keep, I keep a OneNote full of all of the different prompts for all of the different products. And I can then just copy and paste, but it's also in history. So I can use it again and again as well. So helping people understand the prompting basics is then really important. And I talk about this in the blog, because people don't understand the prompting basics and some of the taxonomy that sits behind it in AI. So with the promptathons I've been doing with Microsoft, I was tweaking them a whole heap around when was I getting the aha moment? Because as an adoption specialist, for me, it's about that. I want to watch the brain. Literally, it's that spike moment. It's an actual brain activity. The aha moment is everything's firing and they're going, oh, I got it. Okay, right. And I see that literally light up in their face. And that's the one thing I love about being a trainer, is that light up moment. So I was tweaking things in the promptathon so I could physically see the light up in the room. And the way that I was tweaking the promptathons was, as part of the workshops and the webinars and, and having a play with them, was understanding some of the taxonomy. Things like mega verbs. You've got standard verbs, create, there's kind of their standard: edit, search, find. They're all the mega verbs. But there's so many verbs. There's like over 190 verbs you could actually play around with. There's other things. I love paraphrase, for example. I'm doing it all the time off the back of a meeting. Paraphrase this meeting and turn it into an email for me for Mary, so that I can send it off with this type of a tone and this kind of sentiment, and also look at our previous meeting notes. That was, and the link to it kind of thing. And then it creates a whole email for me based off a conversation. So, they're the sorts of things that I might actually use along the way. Now, you've got the, who are you going to include? You've got all the context. Microsoft have got their GCSE. Now, I go a little further in terms of goal, context, source, and expectation of the output. I go, you've got the tone as well. And in tones, there's so many different tones. Microsoft give you the informal, formal, the creative, the poem, for example, but there are so many more. I like to do the kind of an enthusiastic, inspirational, and so you can combine tones together. Or it could be, I'm a pessimistic, sarcastic. And I've used that when I was doing blogs around what are the challenges, got very different tones. And someone said to me, I have to speak to the tax department. I went, why don't you use the word mercy? Oh, that's a good one. And often we don't have the communication, maybe degrees or skills behind us to know the words that we could use to change the tone of dealing with AI. Then we have things like inclusive modifiers. An inclusive modifier being, I'm a CEO and I'm writing the strategic or a letter to the business, and I want it to be in a family-friendly tone, inclusive, valued, openness, it's balance, it's, all those type of, inclusive modifiers that you could actually use. I want them to feel valued, or I want it to be an authentic tone, or I want it to be inclusive modifier. Then there are things like they don't understand some of the other taxonomies around what are the type of files that you could actually pull from. Most people know I want to do a proposal, or I'm creating an FAQ, or I'm doing an email, but if I was looking at different content, things like if you're in Word and you go file, new, and you got all those templates that you could potentially have as part of Word or PowerPoint or Excel, you can actually ask for those type of templates. It will recognize as a taxonomy those type of templates. Then we get into, and I say, you can be anyone that you want to be. I don't have to be Kirsty, adoption. I could be, I'm a pastry chef and I'm teaching basic students how to temper chocolate, and I can create a PowerPoint on how to temper it with step-by-step guidance and modules and my baking. I don't have to be who I am. I can be a chef with 20 years experience or a chef with 1 year experience. So, that and time and the fact that they can go, ask for the last year of everything I've done in email, documents, Word, whatever, everywhere. Have a look at what I've done in the last year to help me build out my KPIs based on my strengths and weaknesses, and give me what are my gaps, and look at this previous and look at the whole last year. I might have only had Copilot a week, but it's grounded in my data. Look at everything from the last 6 months or a year. People don't realize they can go back that far. Then we get to dive into, some of the other areas when it comes to it. For example, we're asking for photos and videos. It's got create a new video, create a photo, for example. And people don't necessarily know the words to use in Designer to get a particular output. I will say I want a claymation picture, and a lot of people will go, well, what's claymation? And I go, well, it's like Wallace and Gromit do that claymation, or stop motion, which is the claymation look and feel. So our biggest challenge is we don't know necessarily the words to use because we had the world open up to us effectively, but often we don't know what to ask for. Even things like business models. In my space, I use ProSci, the whole ADCAR model. Or if I'm in, training, it's ADDIE. Or if I'm in, there's so many different models. The SWOT, everyone knows kind of the strengths, weakness, SWOT model. But every industry has a particular model. If I'm doing HR and I'm doing interviews, you might have the STAR, behavioral-based questions, or the CAR method. You can ask for all of these type of theories, for example. And if you're that's like programming languages and human languages. Even the languages that are available, there's like 26 different languages, but there's more. There's like the first base language, and then there are others. Like if I ask it for Australian, I get throw a shrimp on the barbie because it's American. It's not a prawn, of course, it's a shrimp on the barbie. And I'm like going, that sounds just dreadful. I have to actually ask for UK English, but people don't know. They can ask for you. They think they're going to get stuck with the US English. So they don't get the taxonomy that sits fundamentally behind this as a structure. And there's so many other things that we could talk about on that kind of taxonomy piece. But that's where our knowledge gap comes into play. And what I love about dealing with Copilot and when I'm helping people on that adoption journey, that's when they start to light up and they go, do you mean I could? Oh, hell yeah, you could, Even I was dealing with students and I plugged in my mobile phone. I didn't do my laptop. They don't live on a laptop. Plugged in my mobile phone, went to Copilot chat, and I helped them to do and turn on the microphone to have a conversation. Because if you turn on the microphone, it's a very different experience. It feels like you're having a conversation with someone, an AI conversation. So I often help businesses to go to the conversational. So I was getting them to go, here's a job that I want to apply for. And it's going, what's the reason you would like to apply for this job? And they go, I don't know. It looks like fun. And it will come back with, that's a really great reason for this job. Maybe you want to, in the interview, say this instead. Blah. And they go, oh, that's so cool, So we're just seeing a really different interaction. You can start from a basic prompt and go further, or you can build a really good prompt that gives you kind of everything so that you don't have to go back forward 30 times. So helping them to understand that and stretch their thinking to have an AI first mindset is a challenge because embedding that into behaviors. And then Copilot has its limitations. And as quick as we've got something, sometimes it's taken away. And as quick as we tried something and it didn't work, it's available tomorrow and people aren't being curious enough to come back around and just try a different prompt, even on a different day to see, or a different application. So it's getting people to play a little bit more and get into choose your own journey, like the books. I'm like, the older days of choose your own journey kind of books.
And I think the thing is, it's so unstructured too, right? Like, for us, like for me, I'm used to looking at when I'm looking at commandlets. You could look at the parameter list and you go, well, there are these set parameters that I can use to achieve something. Well, if the parameter doesn't exist there, then, well, guess what? I can't do that with this commandlet. But this word is so different because it's not set in stone. It's not structured. And you do need to be creative and play with it, which I think makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. But we're also used to AI very confidently lying to us.
Yeah, look, and that's the thing. I see it all the time. It's like, well, what's your data, governance actually look like? How old is the data that's pulling from? Did you say that it needed to be Q4 of 2024 for that particular information? Or did you just ask a random question and it's pulled up information from 2019? So sometimes not going outside of your skill sets really help because then you can kind of go, fill in the gaps in my knowledge. Have I actually done this correctly? Then trying to jump completely outside sometimes those skill sets where you can't really test it enough. You can ask it to test itself. And that's the great thing about AI going, is this correct in this day and age? and it'll come back. And if you're not sure what it can do, ask it. And I tell them all the time, or get it to ask you questions one at a time, and then work it out and asking questions one at a time. So, but yeah, you've got to go back. It is not autopilot; it's Copilot. So we can't.
It's not the first time I've heard that.
Yeah.
That's it. Do you know?
If you're an organization and you're actually, we talk a lot about getting your data estate in order, something that we talk about on this show quite a lot, which is, we've got all this old school on-prem stuff, and now we want to use AI, so we have to do something with all this data. What's your advice to folks doing that? Is less more as far as putting stuff, getting your data trained and grounded, or can you just, like you mentioned the aged data results, right? If I've got stuff sitting on a file server from 1999 and is no longer relevant to my business whatsoever, does it make sense for me to keep that and train my models on this, or should I be getting rid of that data and only using stuff that is recent and up to date?
Look, I don't necessarily live in that full technological, architecture side of worlds and governance. But the one thing that I will say is where we're seeing it then work really well is the information that you need and focus on is in your SharePoint with an agent that they can actually ask. And then it's very specific as to what it draw from. So we're seeing that in the success, and the average end user can do it. It's a consumption-based license if they've got only Copilot chat. So if they're using it, then they pay for the usage of that SharePoint agent, to be really clear, and to make sure that it's not drawing. When I'm working with them, I say don't wait to get started until such stage as you've cleaned everything up. Otherwise, you'll never clean it up. It's constantly evolving. What you need is a really good reporting process to go, hang on a second, I just saw someone's payslip and here's the link. And what's the reporting process to fix things rather than shut it all down? You need it. It's constantly evolving and constantly changing, and people put information in the wrong place every single day. If we're going to shut it down every single time someone does something wrong, it's not going to help us. We just need to have good sort of governance and compliance and processes and education around security, and not putting information out into ChatGPT, for example. I know a lot of people love ChatGPT, but it's not grounded with that enterprise data protection. And the other thing is, the one reason it is simple is because it's just got one endpoint interface. It's literally just go to ChatGPT, put it in. Copilot has so many places inside the 365 ecosystem to be able to draw from, building in Word and building in PowerPoint and Outlook, and if it's your calendar or your mail, or you're doing it in Teams and in Teams meetings, massive savings in Teams meetings. So those sorts of things. And on average, we're seeing it's a minimum 40 minutes a day for the average worker, but for the general business office worker, it's an hour a day, and for senior leaderships and PAs, it's 2 to 5 hours a day. That's significant ROI. And you can actually measure, like anything we've done measuring in the past. Was it a quicker process when you send a link out compared to emailing documents around? Get them to actually measure the old to the new. And then it can give you a bit of an idea in the prompting, if they're doing it, how much time you saved.
Much easier to justify that $30 a month or whatever it is if you're saving 2 to 5 hours a day, right?
Yeah, I can. I actually did up a if I saved you 5 minutes, just 5 minutes a day, on average, it was giving you back over minimum 2 days a year in terms of time. It was actually 21 days that you actually saved on 5 minutes a day. So, as a productivity specialist, guru, expert, if I'm saving you 5 minutes a day for doing a 1 hour training, I've earned my income, and it is worth being trained. It's worth doing adoption. Change management is way more important now than it's ever been, and it's very worth it. And we don't see the budgets going into it. All these big, huge tech, it's just a license now. You don't have to do too much but turn it on effectively in a lot of ways. You've got to bring people on the journey, and you need to spend and put your money into your adoption programs, or it just falls over. We've watched it again and again, the pain point, and it falling over.
Kirsty, besides AI raising our kids, since we
hang on a second, I'd like to take, bye guys, or just hang them on the wall. You can ask the question of AI, it'll feed you.
Since we're sadly coming up to the top of the hour, we're getting to the part of the show where we ask you, what is it that you'd like to plug? And this could be your LinkedIn profile, could be your blog, obviously your YouTube channel, and all of those we will include in the show notes as well. But give us a shout out on what it is that you'd like to plug before we end off.
I have a Microsoft 365 adoption site. It's called m365adoption.com. The very first page I put up there is all Copilot. So if you're actually doing adoption, you're actually going down that journey, it brings all of the resources together from the Microsoft site, as well as, third parties and webinars that I'm doing. So I have that my YouTube channel. It's M365 Adoption. So I've actually got that YouTube channel that you can join, or you can join me on LinkedIn. And I've got my adoption user groups that I'm running all the time. It's on Meetup, and anyone can actually come along. So feel free to join the adoption user groups if you live in this community and you're trying to drive it forward. We bring together lots of speakers, and the recordings are all available up on YouTube should you wish to actually, join in that space. And don't forget, I'm running the Microsoft Reactive Productivity Series. It is going through till August. There's 11 of them all up. So we've got a few going on. Feel free to have a play. And if you want to see what I'm doing in caking, it's just MVP_decorating on Instagram. It's like MVP_decorating, and you can see some of the cakes that I'm playing around with. So
Wow.
But look, get a copy. If you're living in this space, go grab the wheel behind me, and it would actually help you. It's available for anyone to be able to download on a link on my LinkedIn. So yeah.
Very nice. That's awesome. Kirsty, thank you so much for taking the time to join us. Again, I'm super excited that this was a sort of an Aussie time zone episode, because it just makes my life a lot easier too. But there's just so much here, and so much stuff that I hadn't thought about or considered, right? And I guess that's why it's always awesome to have experts come talk to us about these things. So we'll have to get you back for another episode.
Yeah, absolutely. Be curious. The other thing is, this is not about changing the technology. It's about changing the behaviors. And that's up to you. That's not the technology that's going to change it. It's the behaviors that are going to give you some of the benefits out of this. So go on the journey. It is well worth it. Even just speaking for something like this, I can go, I need to do my bio in no more than 250 words, reduce it down from the 1,300 to 250 for me. Hallelujah. Thank you very much. Thank you guys for having me on. I've really enjoyed chatting with you.
Thank you so much.